Welcome back, everybody, to the Hunt Hike Harvest podcast. I have a new guest with us today, which I'm pretty excited about, CJ Sefcovic, who we met at the Mile High Hunt Expo, which was super cool. Number one, we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, as we go here. But got a chance to watch you call. CJ is part of the Mile High Note game call crew. Finished second in the pro division, which I think is if you were at the show, you'll understand that's an amazing field to play second in for sure. Only to a two-time world champion. But wanted to talk a little bit about Colin. We talked a little bit about hunting offline before we kind of got on, and some of the things that you've done as far as kind of like how you got into hunting. I know there's some connectivity kind of between those two actually. With the D-Sings and them like kind of encouraging you to get into that space. But talk a little bit about, let's start there and we'll kind of work our way forward with all the other things I got going in my head, questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, well, the D-Sings definitely played a kind of integral part for me getting involved in the archery hunting side of things. I grew up waterfowl hunting primarily, turkey hunting, small game hunting, and I was always kind of nudged to get into archery hunting just because how much I loved all the other types of hunting I did. But so finally I broke down and bought a bow in 2018, and the rest is history. That first year I went archery hunting. I just kind of tagged along with them that first year, and I tried to film a few hunts and just tried to pick up as much knowledge and skills I possibly could. And after I saw a bull come into 20 yards and I was hooked, I said, okay, I have to do it. But so yeah, it's been a rabbit hole since, and I spend 2 or 3 weeks every September chasing elk.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that's a very common story from a lot of people. I think Jason, my business partner, he always tells a story about he was starting to get into the hunting side of things, and he would hear me tell stories about going elk hunting. And at some point I had the same thing where one of my best friends, he would always go elk hunting, and we'd talk about it, and I'm like, what do I got to do to go on one of those hunts, right? So I get the invite once, and then Jason and I became business partners, and then he's like, hey, what do I got to do to go on one of those hunts with you now that I was in the crew? Yeah, I was in the crew, right? And he said the same thing. He's like, the first time I heard a bull bugle, he's like, that was it. It was over for me.
Yeah, everybody talks about it, but until you're 20 yards from a bull and you feel that rumble in your chest, it just can't beat it. So
it's hard to, Jason was, in the big leagues and had 40,000 people screaming at him and stuff like that. I think that's the only comparable. I don't have one, so it's like that's to me the only thing that would maybe rival that. But so you got drug out there, you got hooked. Talk a little bit about the process. I think kind of moving forward from there, which I think is everybody you got kind of pulled into it, you got excited for it, and now you're like, okay, now what do I do? Like, you want to try and learn, you want to try and find success. Obviously, going with people that know what they're doing, I think early on is a big part that's going to be super helpful to that, which sounds like, you were in pretty good hands. Yeah. But what was the next steps where you're like, okay, I mean, let's go?
Yeah, so for me, 2019 is actually when I brought a bow into the woods and started hunting. So camped, basically shared an elk camp with the D-Sings, but hunted solo that year, pretty much. Last couple days of the season, I hunted with Thomas. But so for me, it was just like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make a bunch of mistakes. I'm going to learn from those mistakes, but those mistakes are not going to be attributed to anybody else but myself.
Right.
So for me, just, the summer before that season, I went up, put all my own trail cameras up, scouted all different areas, and tried to focus in on where I thought elk were going to be. And just a lot of prep work before that season. And then during that season, just fully immersing myself into it day in and day out. I mean, there were days, I think for the first 3 or 4 days that year, I didn't even hear an elk. So just staying consistent day after day and then just learning. Definitely had some heartbreaks that first season. And I had, ultimately successful season that first year. But definitely learned a lot by just being out there, spending time in the woods, and just learning what elk do, especially during September.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I look at all the seasons. I've been elk hunting now for, gosh, I don't know, like probably going on 20 years. And I was just telling some stories just the other day about, some failures and, things that I'm like, ah, man, like if I just would have been here, or if I just would have, thought through before, that. And it's like, I feel like that's just an ongoing, struggle with elk hunting where yes, you learn, and yes, you continue to try and get better at the craft, right? Which is this setup and understanding the wind and where should we be looking. And, for me, I think that's been the biggest part of my process is like, I started going with people that knew what they were doing, and you just kind of tag along and whatever. And now it's like, we shifted entirely over to where now it's like, I got to figure out where I'm going. I need to put in the work. And now you have all these resources, I think, that are so much more helpful even than when I started, right? Where it's like, now you got courses on learning how to read maps, online and e-scouting and all these
A lot of
things.
resources for sure.
And so I think that's super helpful, but I don't think it's gotten any easier.
No, I mean, ultimately you're still trying to get within 40, 50 yards of a bull.
Yeah.
And that, even if you have all the technology, all the resources in the world, nothing's going to really prepare you for that moment until you're actually in that moment.
Yeah.
And every situation's different too with elk. I mean, they're going to do the opposite of what you think they're going to do most of the time. So
for sure.
I just think though, over time, spending enough time in the woods, you're going to develop better instincts as a hunter. And I think that's what I've been able to do is just put in a lot of consistent effort and just kind of develop those instincts, those situations.
Yeah, and I think that I've learned over the years too that some of the things that you kind of like discard and some of the things you like bring into your arsenal over time is you can't leave elk to go find more elk.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like simple stuff like that. Like you're never going to outsmart the wind.
Yeah.
Like all those little things where. Jason always kind of gives me crap because he's a guy that like does one of these where he's like looking, he's like, let's go this way, let's go, and like he's always, and I'm just like, just follow the ridge line, like look at the topography, use your eyes,
exactly.
And like the amount of time that you spend just like affords you so much better instinct on like how am I gonna get from here to there, or what's the easiest inroads and outroads of places, and then at the same time, if I've spend enough time out there, you also start to look at your experiences and how you can start to kind of like read those and go, well, there's no point in going there.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And you start eliminating things to try and make your life easier too. Because I think probably guilty, and I'm sure everyone, maybe I'm the only one where it's like, I've probably hiked an inordinate amount of miles that have been a complete waste of my time.
Yeah.
That now I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's like hours of our hunt just thrown away being in places that should never be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Focusing on the areas that there's elk is huge, and not leaving those areas. And one mistake I used to make a lot, and I think a lot of guys make, is just one thing I learned is is in the morning, everybody, obviously the wind's going down, so a lot of guys start low. I used to do that, and I used to just follow elk up the mountain until they went and bedded, and I'd never catch up to them. So what I started doing is I started just first thing in the morning, 5:30, getting my butt up to the top of the ridge. And by the time I'm able to position myself to where, they are, it's 10 a.m. in the morning, the wind's starting to switch, and they're going up to bedding. I can a lot of times cut them off when they're on the way to bed. So just those different strategies you learn, over time that kind of pay off.
But for sure. So going from that, we talked a little bit about get out, go with these things, kind of start learning. Year two, you go out, you're like, I'm going to go at this solo. That way I got no one to blame.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Tell me about that. Like, was that a conscious choice? Was it them saying like, hey, you go figure it out. We're going to be over here, like filling our tags. Like, how did that go?
Well, I mean, there's definitely times, as you know, days in the elk woods can be long. So there's a lot of time midday there where you wish you had a hunting buddy to,
for sure.
put ideas off of or whatever. But yeah, for me, it was an intentional choice.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be able, I do like hunting alone. I like hunting solo. I just like my time in the woods.
Yeah.
And I feel like I always have the better experiences when I'm alone and so I did make that choice intentionally just to learn and become better. And so, yeah, I dove into it. And my first year in the woods, I ended up wounding a bull 20 yards. And so I think it was like day 10 into the hunt. And I wrote about it. I did an article in CBA, but I ended up, bull came in, it was 10 a.m. in the morning, and the sun was just peeking over the trees at that perfect angle. And I was kind of just relaxed, getting ready to hike out of the woods and just doing some cow calling here and then. And all of a sudden I heard a bugle right behind me. And I saw a bull coming down through the timber above me. And I was focused on that bull up above me, and that bull from behind me was on a dead charge into the meadow. So before I knew it, he popped out, and that sun was kind of right in my line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
I drew back, and there was enough shadow to where I thought I made a good shot, but released an arrow. Bull took him off the mountain. At that point, my heart's just racing, and
for sure,
just first time ever shooting at an elk, first time ever with a bow.
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm supposed to wait an hour now before I go. Like, right. All the emotions are running. So
yeah.
I finally go look for the bull, and I find my arrow, it's split in half, so I hit it, but no blood. So that sinking feeling, okay, now what do I do next? As a rifle hunter, you don't necessarily have to deal with that as much, or waterfowl or whatever. So the desync came over and they helped me track that bull. But long story short, never found any blood, never found the bull. We decided collectively that that bull probably didn't get lethally wounded, probably survived. But that was a huge, like, for me as a new archery hunter, that was a huge heartbreak.
Yeah.
And I didn't even honestly feel like hunting, for 2, 3, 4 days after that. They convinced me to keep going, and on the second to last day, I killed my first bull in pretty much the same spot. So, yeah.
I've done that where we almost killed a bull, and in the exact same place, mm-hmm. one of my friends ended up killing that exact bull from where I almost killed him like 3 or 4 days later. And so, there's, gosh, I mean, the stories and stuff like that are just endless. I think it's they will continue to be.
For sure.
As you go through and you recount experiences and again, like, successes and failures and things like that. But so now you mentioned like cow calling. We mentioned meeting kind of via that, right, and through some mutual people that I think both of us know in the industry and things like that. Talk a little bit about how. I mean, it's pretty natural when you're friends with, a call company, essentially. But how did that start for you, and what did that process look like? Were they coaching you, or just talk us through some of that?
Yeah, so the Deasings are great elk callers, and being around them, I wanted to help promote the company and try to be a resource. And Tom Senior was trying to push me to, get into competition calling, just to kind of help out at shows and promote the brand.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I got into it. I didn't get to start off in the men's division, though. I kind of took an unorthodox route. My second competition ever, they threw me in pros, and that was at the World Championship in Park City.
Why not? Just send it.
I learned by ripping the Band-Aid off, and so that was definitely a learning experience. Before that, I think I competed at the Jamboree, but we got thrown into pros in the World Championships, and after that, I kind of saw what it took to compete at that level. So, when I got back from that, it kind of stirred a hunger inside of me, and I practiced day in and day out, and started going to smaller competitions and then regional competitions and smaller shows, and it's just kind of what it's become. It's become a good way to kind of stay involved with elk hunting throughout the year. as
Yeah.
well. So
I think a really good way to think about it, right? Which is when you do stuff like that. I know Jared, my buddy from Hunt League, he has a function in there which is like invest, train, shoot, right? And his mission was that his goal was to try and get 300 days of training in. He wanted to get 200 days of investment in and like 100 days of shooting in the year, right? And I think that stuff like that is what really helps kind of like keep your mind in it, right? And so I'm very similar when it comes to the calling piece, which is usually in the spring for me. I just have my calls in the car. Um, Full admission, I have to do a better job of making sure I take my reads out of the car when starts getting hot out, right? Because like I talked with like Jason Phelps, and he was like, "No, that's good. Like do that because then that way you ensure more customers, right? Like keep buying reads. They do not like heat too well, but I've always just found that like there's I think a lot of parallels to calling. That's like being a guitarist or a musician or something like that, where it's like it's a craft that is learned. It's a craft that takes a lot of skill and practice, and like you're never going to be like perfect at it. And there's not a single way to do it. And you see with like how many different types of reeds there are. You see people that can't even blow diaphragm calls. You see folks like the Slayer guys now have their handheld that Phelps did. There has built-in diaphragm. Like it's come so far in the last like 8 to 10 years that I think it's tough for people to like know where to start, right? So maybe talk about that, like from your experience, because you've got so much experience in terms of probably trying out a million different types and kinds of reads, calls, other things. Like how's that process, and then would you recommend the person coming in and saying like, man, where the heck do I start?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I tell guys to ask that question at shows is, start off by just getting a reed in your mouth, getting comfortable having a reed in your mouth,
Right.
because that's a huge barrier of entry for a lot of folks. They'll come wanting to buy out calls, but they're not able to use an internal reed.
Right.
They can use an external, but to really, I think, maximize your success in the woods, to be able to stop bulls and be able to hands free, we really believe in diaphragm calls.
Yeah.
So just getting your palate used to those is huge. There's a lot of resources out there. I mean, we have YouTube. There's a lot of instructional videos on YouTube. I know Tom with Mile High No Game Calls. He does coaching calls via Zoom. So you could schedule a coaching call and get one-on-one practice from how to put the reed in your mouth to how to start making different variations of sounds.
Right.
But if I was just getting into it, I'd buy I'd start getting reeds into my mouth, single or double reed. Usually those are easier to use for most folks, and just start making sounds.
Yeah.
And then over time, you can YouTube videos, CDs, instructionals. You start to make different variations of pitch, different variations of sound.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too, where you might sound like crap one day, but you just give it 2 or 3 days, and you come back to the call, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I got it. Because subconsciously your mind picks up things over time. So even if it's 5 minutes a day, putting a reed in your mouth and trying to make cow sounds, over time, the compounding of that does make a difference.
Well, and I think the thing that I've found now is like when I go and switch, like I think I have 4 or 5 different diaphragms that I carry, not because I like need that, but I like to have a few different ones. I think once you get to a point where you can, kind of start to make, cow sounds, calf sounds, estrus sounds, you can bugle, you can locate, you can start getting, a little bit more into, lip balling and those types of things. Like that's when, for me personally, you can tell me if I'm wrong, like I have some that I like better for those and others that I think work in fact, one of the ones I just got the other day, I was going to Colorado Springs and I happened to be, I found it because it was in my final harness. And I pull it out and I'm like, oh man, like this makes like really good cow sounds. Like, and I'm like, but I can't bugle with that diaphragm. And so my evolution with that has been that like now that I've kind of at least established being able to make all those sounds, that it becomes a heck of a lot easier to like kind of mix and match.
For sure.
Do you see that? Do you use multiples? Like, what's your?
Yeah, so I do. I use a lot of times. I find when I break in a cow call the way I want it, I can't get those high bugle notes with it. It's just too broken in. Yeah. I could do subtle bugles, lower pitch bugles, but I can't get those high end bugles just because the latex isn't tight enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I on stage I always usually use two reeds. I kind of break in a cow call, and then I break in kind of what I want to be my bugle reed for. But guys like Thomas, Bo, they all use one reed for their cow and bugle during competition. So. It all depends on personal preference. I know those guys do use like triple reeds, so they're going to be a lot harder to break in, but you have that extra layer of latex, so you can still usually bugle, but if you can get those lower layers of latex broken in, right, you can still get down and do calf sounds, cow call sounds with them as well. So.
Yeah. So I think the other part is now because the calling world has gotten so much broader, right? Like, yeah. I think when I started, it was like, I'm going to Bass Pro Shops, and you and I mentioned Cabela's, which I have much more affinity towards because I grew up with the Cabela's like family. The kids they're 30 miles from where I grew up, and I was like, you're going in and you're finding, the primos and those everything that was just in those kind of big box type places, and I don't think a lot of the boutique styles that are now Mile High and Phelps and Slayer and even like Joe Gillia from Elk Bros, like he has his own line, and there's guys there's another really well-known group that are come out of Canada. I can't think of them right now, but I think they help Joe make some of his calls too. Great guys, but anyway, like, what do you think? And I think this is kind of like maybe for the listener who's like, dude, how the hell do I know what to even get or buy? Because they all look the same. Like some of them just look like they're different colors. Like, how do you kind of recommend people sort that? And in terms of the way that they're made, talk a little bit about like how they're different. Because I think that part's important too. Like, how are they different, and how do people start like making that choice of a good all around place to start maybe?
Yeah, so it's tough, to kind of narrow down your. I mean, it all depends really how the reed fits in your mouth, and that's an individual thing. But I recommend trying several different reeds, several different brands even, and just finding out what works for you. Because most companies sell single reed diaphragms, for example, but like our latex is going to be a little thicker, stretched a little tighter than a lot of reeds. It's going to last a lot longer, but it's going to take a lot longer to break in. So someone that wants to come in and make, start making cow sounds from when they open the package might be a little tougher with our products versus another company where that latex is stretched a lot lighter. Yeah. So I would recommend starting out, if you're just starting out, start out with a single reed or a double reed, probably a single reed. Just start making cow sounds and try several different reeds and find one that works best for you. Yeah. One thing I will say is, if you rip one out of the package and it doesn't sound great right away, don't give up on it. A lot of times those reeds just need to be broken in. So just giving all of them time to break in and trying to find out what works best for you is huge. And, there's a lot of, we used to all have just the flat diaphragm calls. Now there's a lot of dome calls out there. Yeah. We're actually going to be releasing our dome call here soon with Mile High, but, those dome calls are super easy for a lot of guys to use. Yeah. So if that's and I think it's a good barrier of entry to kind of start to learn diaphragms. Just because you can start making sounds right away. I do think you can do a lot more with a standard flat reed, especially when you have 2 or 3 layers of latex on it. But yeah, just really trying out different options and figuring out what's best for you.
Yeah. So, do you use a flat reed?
I use both. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the Mile Hunt Expo, I used a dome call.
Okay.
So that was our prototype.
Okay.
So I love the dome call. Can't really get a lot of those deeper notes just because it is 1 layer of latex. It's a single reed.
Yeah.
But so I can do a lot more with the triple. But I love both. So
yeah, I think that's where the nuance. I know you talk to people, they're like, I got to cut mine and whatever. And I'm lucky enough where I've found I don't ever need to. Most of them I can just like throw them right in.
Yeah.
But I have found, like you said, I mean, there are some that over the course of time that I've tried, and I've tried a boatload of them. In fact, I did an entire calling like series where I had like everything I'd ever bought over years, and we actually took a decibel reader and like I bugled with all of them to see like how they would, you could actually see them, the pitch and the tone, the amplitude and all that kind of stuff. And it's just interesting to me that there are some that I found, for me, like, a lot of people watch like, like Corey Jacobson, so, he's a 12-time world champ, whatever. Like, I can't blow his call to save my life.
Yeah.
Like, it's just way too much finesse in there. Like, maybe it's because I have none. I don't know. I'm just like,
everybody's different.
I've never been able to use any of his. So, but I think the next thing for me is like, you spend a ton of time, building up your kind of calling proficiency, right? Which is the competition calling. How in your mind does that translate over to like being in the woods? Because I think a lot of times people talk about that, especially like I see it, especially in the waterfowl world. People are like, that's not dog calling.
Hope you don't do that.
The blind. Exactly, right? But how do you think that translates for you when you get out hunting? Because I think there's so much more situational stuff that has to go on there, but just maybe talk about that. Maybe there is any.
Yeah, I mean, with competition calling, I mean, you're obviously trying to show judges your variation of elk sounds.
Right.
So you're going to do everything from quiet bugles to buzz bugles to guttural sounds to cow calf, combos. So you're trying to just show variation of what you can do as an elk caller on stage.
Right.
So that's obviously not going to correlate to a hunting situation. Obviously, the different types of notes, the calls you can use in certain situations, but you're not going to go out there to the woods 90% of the time and use what you would do on stage, just because it's probably going to scare most elk away.
Agreed.
But yeah, so every situation's different. But for me, it's the comfortability of being able to do, in a situation where there's a herd of elk and I'm trying to mimic a cow or a calf, being able to go back and forth and act like a lost calf. I've called several bulls in acting like a lost calf. So and cows with a bull behind them. So, it's just having the comfortability with those different notes and those different calls is important for the woods. But every situation is going to be different. There might be times when you're in with a herd bull and you're in his wheelhouse and you want to piss him off and you're doing a buzz bugle at him. We've done that and had success doing that, but the majority of the time you're going to scare an elk away by doing that. So, a lot of times you want to act like a subdominant bull, quieter bull. But yeah, it's really situational, but just having those options in your tool belt is important.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I figured you'd say, which is if you can't make that spectrum of calls and not at least have them ready, being able to, I think, read those situations and know when. I had this conversation a couple weeks ago with one of the guys at Western Hunt Fest, and we were kind of talking about that exact thing, which is, I think, the popularity now of how many entities there are on YouTube. You can pick them out, whether it's Hush or Born and Raised guys or Hunting Public or whatever. It's like it's so readily accessible how many people are just making their own independent films, right? And I think when those gained popularity, you saw a lot of those guys run out and they're just charging through the mountains, and they're just screaming in every direction. And now you fast forward a bunch of years where we went into an area, I think it was last year, and like a hunter had literally put a sign where the like trailhead was like, leave your bugle tube here.
Yeah.
Like, stop, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing this kind of like upheaval of people that are just sick and guys running around just screaming all the time.
Yeah.
And I find that like an interesting conversation because number one, I think there's good in it, there's bad in it, and most importantly, I think there's opportunity in it if you're the one that's maybe on the smarter end of that spectrum. So what's your take with stuff like that? Because I think it's I'll let you go first and I'll follow up.
Yeah, well, we talk about it all the time. I mean, especially where we hunt a lot of the time in over-the-counter units, a lot of people hunt those units, and a lot of people are learning elk hunting, and which is great. We're all about that.
Sure.
We want people to get excited about calling and elk hunting, but you have to be able to adapt to that as well, because not only are you trying to outsmart elk, you're trying to outsmart other humans.
Right.
So yeah, for us, it depends on the situation, but there's 10 hunters bugling in the woods, and elk are sitting listening to that. They know what's legit, what's not legit. Yeah. So a lot of times doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing, being super quiet, super subtle, focusing on those soft cow sounds, or not calling at all, maybe calling intermittently, or just trying to sneak in on a herd. Just trying to adapt to those situations and really do the opposite of what most people are doing out there.
Yeah.
There are units, it depends where you're hunting, but there are units where you can bugle elkin all day long.
Yeah.
But if you're hunting a super competitive unit, I tend to try to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So
I think that's great advice. I mean, I think for me, I think it was 2 years ago, we hunt an area where we buffer this line where there's outfitters on the other side of it, right? And it's private. But we've killed like 3-4 elk, and I'm talking within 100 yards of where that line is at, right? Yeah. Never been a fan of doing anything illegal or trespass. Like that's never been me. I don't like to get shot at or get screamed at, or worse yet, get thrown in jail, right? But in those cases, I've seen 2 years ago where there was a bull that was down on that side of the property, and he would just work his way uphill, work his way downhill, work his way. I mean, it was like this dude was on a track, and it didn't matter how many times you would like bugle, he would answer every single time. I mean, it was just nonstop. And I watched that bull pull 2 or 3 different sets of hunters all the way down into the bottom of that thing to get down there and find out that deer were just barking up the wrong tree, and you could just hear him like bugle back, let's go, bugle. Exactly. And they're like, oh, fired up, and just watch guys go bailing, and it was a hellhole. It's like 800 foot of elevation, just straight down into this like bottom, and I think what you said is learning to do the opposite sometimes. I mean, that's maybe a little bit of a different situation, but I find that I've talked with so many like good callers, and as much as everyone loves bugling and all that, and you kind of mentioned there's like softer cow sounds, the lost calf sound, like so many guys. Joe, I know I talked to him not too long ago, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, I promise you'll kill way more. Because to find that like bull that really wants to like fight and come charging after you, and is way too few and far between. About as opposed to the rest of them that will find more curiosity and going like, why are there cows over there, right? Or like, did we lose someone here? We could find them, right?
And the tricky part is a lot of times though, if you are hunting an area that has a lot of hunters, we've heard actual elk respond to us, and we're like, there's no way that's an actual elk, that's a hunter for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they end up being elk, because elk don't always sound perfect.
Sure.
And I mean, we've had elk give us lazy bugles, and we're like, there's just no way, but it ends up being an elk. So that's when it starts being tricky, because a lot of times elk get super quiet and they'll start letting out lazy bugles and kind of weird sounds just because they want to stay low key. They know there's hunters out there and they just want to kind of be under the radar a little bit. So,
one of my best friends killed a bull like so similar to that. Not I don't know, a handful of years ago, and he was just letting out this like weakest little kind of like halfway raspy, cow sound that like he could barely reproduce. Like later, but he's like, I don't know what. He goes, any other sound than that, and he would not move. And all he did was kind of like, you could hear him kind of like huff and glunk a little.
Yeah.
He never made any more noise than that. And he goes, every single time I make that just kind of like weird off tone cow sound, I'd hear him kind of like move a little,
come a few steps,
and said it took like 30, 40 minutes, and he shot him at like 17 yards. In dark timber, and so it's a symphony. I think a lot of times it's like you got to find the right notes
for sure,
and they're all different. Like you may be like, man, this worked, it'll work next time, and next time it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I mean, every elk's different, and every elk's in a different mood too. It's just like turkey hunting. You might find a hot tom right next to another tom that doesn't want anything to do with the call. So, just a lot it depends on the elk and where they are at the herd as well. So
for sure. So you brought up turkey hunting. We talked about this. Are you a good turkey caller too?
I'm probably not as good of a turkey caller as I am an elk caller, but I'm a good enough turkey caller to kill turkeys. So I love turkey hunting. I grew up turkey hunting, and everybody said elk hunting, archery elk hunting, turkey hunting on steroids, and it's definitely that and more. But I love turkey hunting, and I mean I know enough to call them in. So
that's
I don't do any of the competition stuff for turkeys, but maybe one day we'll see.
Well, I find that people that typically get into any type of calling, usually like you learn so much about like pressure and mouth shapes and how to use where your tongue should be and all that kind of stuff. Like we were talking about that beforehand. Just waterfowling for me. I mean, like I grew up with so much waterfowl hunting where if you got in a blind and you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go duck hunting, and like I have buddies that like if you started blowing your call and it was bad, like I'd literally be like grabbing me, like throwing the cord, like no, like you're out, like So and I think that as you do that, and I find for myself, it's like it's easier to progress into doing other stuff. I don't. The like really high level goose collars still to me are pretty phenomenal. I'm not one of those. I would say proficient, but I would not say I'm an expert in goose calling. But I do love it. So you have a lot of waterfowl as well. You're talking about you guys do a bunch of waterfowl hunting also.
Yeah. So I grew up waterfowl hunting primarily. I grew up on the Arkansas River down south and had a spot down there I always went as a kid, and through high school and college, that's what I did. Is I waterfowl hunted, and I was obsessed with it. And then big game season I was always into football, so it was always kind of during hunting season. I never had a ton of time for big game stuff, but always was in the back of my mind, and finally was able to have more time to do it. And I would say that's what I do most of now. I still love to waterfowl hunt during the summer or during the winter. Have a pup and like to get him out, but I mean, my big game itch just keeps continuing to grow. So
I know I usually don't need any excuse to get out and hunt about anything. But when people always ask like, oh, if you could just do one, like if you only had one, and I'm always like, well, that's an easy answer.
It is.
There's no doubt about it, right? And even for me, like it was one of those things where the first probably 5 years that I elk hunted was all rifle hunting. Mm-hmm. And we would do like a third season, and it was kind of one of those where I was always really enamored by archery, and I grew up in Nebraska, and like all my buddies, they always tree stand hunted, and they all had bows and everything else, and much like you, it's like I was always playing football, I was always playing basketball, stuff like that, and I just never had the time.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Colorado and did the rifle hunting for a while, and I'm like, this is cool, and I'm hooked, and I love it. And then I started kind of like my first archery elk hunt should have probably scared me away because it was like one of those Labor Days when it snowed a foot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we were up, and like two idiots had like a little pop-up tent that like fell in on us like all night long, and I'm like, this is archery hunting? Like, sign me up. And I was hooked ever since, and now I'm like, one of our athletes was in training. He's like, oh, like, what do you shoot? And I was like, 300 spine, and he was like, looked at me, and I'm like, I don't really shoot a rifle anymore. Like, I must have virtually given it up because I would just a few other reasons, but I'm like, I would just as soon always have a bow in my hand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love to hunt, elk with a bow, and I mean, it's all fun. It's all challenging in its own way, but for me, it's hunting with a bow ensures you're going to be right there with that animal.
Right.
Usually within 30 or 40 yards most of the time. So just being able to get an animal in bow range is such an accomplishment, such a feat. If you have a rifle on hand, you can shoot an animal from 200-300 yards away. You don't have to get them to close that distance.
No.
Or you don't have to close that distance, but with a bow you have to. So just being able to do that, and then being able to basically harvest an animal with a sharp stick is really what we're doing. Successfully is it's a challenge, and but it's rewarding. So
I think for me that's part of it too, where I almost feel like there's so much disconnect in rifle hunting, and don't get me wrong, I don't badmouth any of that. Like, I know it's a lot of people, that's their jam and they love it, and like guys like to shoot out to all kinds of crazy distances and things like that. But for me, it was like losing that personal feel to a lot of that almost was another part of like my own just mindset of like, man, I don't feel as good about it as knowing the work that you have to put in, the proximity, the game that's within it to actually accomplish filling a tag with a bow. And like, there was something about that to it for me also that's like my personal feeling emotionally towards the whole thing and psychologically was just, it changed in that regard based on that too. Because I'm like, man, I don't know, I almost feel like I'm cheating the elk to shoot him at 450 yards.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it depends too. Like, everybody's different. I mean, it depends on, for sure, I think it's the most rewarding way to take an elk or a deer. It depends on the situation too. A lot of guys have limited time. They got to go in there. They don't have time to scout, and they have 1 or 2 days to hunt. So I know a lot of guys in my family are in that boat. So, being able to take a rifle out, especially someone doesn't have as much time to get reps in and practice.
Yeah.
So everybody's situation is different, but I can say firsthand as a bow hunter, having harvested a bull with several bulls, but a bull with a rifle and a bow, that bow hunting is it's as rewarding as it gets.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
So talk about bucket list for you. Like, what's your the pinnacle of hunt for you? I mean, I don't know, maybe you've already had it, but you managed. I know I've kind of perused through like your Instagram and stuff like that. You had a lot of success, but what's the A1 for you as far as best hunt?
By far, my bucket list hunt. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to do it, but is a brown bear, grizzly bear with a bow.
Yeah,
that's kind of the pinnacle hunt for me.
Dangerous country.
Dangerous country, but since I've watched a lot, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and watched a lot of videos on YouTube and talked to a lot of guys at shows, and it's just, to me, I feel like that type of hunt, given the pressure, given the country, is the ultimate test of composure and just mental toughness. So, and that's really why I want to do it, is because it's beautiful country. I mean, those animals are amazing.
Yeah.
But just for that test of mental toughness as well.
Yeah. So. I don't know. You're a better man than me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like people. We were just on a phone call. You were kind of caught the tail end of it, and I was telling them we were talking about bear hunts. And Whitney, who was on the call, she was like, she had a really nice bear that she just totally, she screwed up once, had a second chance, screwed up again, and she's like, it's like, that's it for me. Like, I don't care. I have to find a way to fill this bear tag, you know. And I told her, I'm like, I am the bear kryptonite, because every single time I have a bear tag, it's guaranteed I will not see a bear.
Yeah.
Every time I don't have a bear tag, guarantee you I will see a bear.
Yeah.
I'm like 7 years running, where last year I'm like, forget it. Like, I'm not going to get a concurrent bear tag. Huge black bear, like 40 yards. I'm like,
just walking by, or
like, hear him come kind of scooting in. I could tell just based on like the, you know, like you can always tell a little bit between like an elk and a bear, right? Like just a little more saunter, kind of whatever, right? Walks out, broadside. Does one of these. I got it on film. Walks off, and I'm like looking at Jason. I'm like, damn, really?
One of these years, maybe.
Yeah. Right? And then 2 years ago, I'm like, get a concurrent bear tag out there. And it's like, I've almost like hopscotched that for about like 7 years in a row, where it never fails. So like,
I just carry a bear tag now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just sooner or later it should happen. But I've never actively been one of those where I'm like out chasing bears.
For sure,
number one, I don't. I'd have to have someone show me a thing or two, you know. But that's super cool. I mean, I think number one, those are that's some serious country. Getting up into a place like that. Number two, aggressive, huge bears too, potentially, and to do it with a bow. Yeah. I have his visions of like Jim Shockey Fred Eichler.
Yeah.
You've seen that?
Oh yeah.
One with Fred and that just charges him. You know? Like, holy cow. Yeah, I would probably fall out of the boat. But,
but that's when you can tell your grandkids about one day.
For sure. For sure.
So but I just think that would be a super challenging and just a pinnacle hunt for me.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll get that done. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah.
I just find it's like the planning, right? Like
that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
And it's gonna take a couple bucks.
Yeah. A few.
Jared and I were talking about some of that. He did a bear hunt in Alberta.
Okay.
And he was just up there with the guys from Arkin, and he was telling me he had bought those guys. They won or purchased those tags in that hunt through Wild Sheep Foundation at their banquet, or at the sheep show, I think it was. And he was saying that they were talking about that guiding outfit. They have some bighorn hunts that start for them up there at like $100,000.
Wow.
And I was like, for one? And he's like, yeah. I guess I'll never see that hunt in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's insane. But I know there's some pretty high dollar ones out there. And I think are you going to try and guide a hunt like that, or do you think you'll do your homework and figure out how to solo with something like that?
No, I'll definitely have to probably get a guide involved, just because I think where I was researching, you actually have to have a guide with you.
Yeah.
Those hunts are super expensive. You're looking at between $30,000 and $40,000 for a hunt like that in most cases. So definitely a lifetime hunt, not something I do every year.
Yeah.
By any means, I can't do that, but definitely one I would like to get to.
Yeah, one of my high school friends he guides hunts up there, bear hunts up there. Started as like a camp cook.
Okay, and he's worked his way up. And so he's told me some pretty crazy stories of some of the guys that he takes, on the good and the bad side. Guys that just like show up like, show me where the bear are at. And he's like, dude, you probably should have worked out a little before you got here. Like, it's got to be a frustrating thing for a lot of guides. So
that's a massive waste of money.
Yeah.
If you show up for a hunt like that and you're not ready to actually cover some ground, it's not going to work out good.
No.
You get a lot of food. You eat well.
Yeah.
None of it will be there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, You've killed some bears though, right?
Yeah, I killed a black bear 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bear meat. Talk to me. Are you a big bear meat fan?
I do like bear meat a lot. I'm still learning different ways to cook it.
Yeah.
Bear. I've had some awesome bear steaks.
Really?
But yeah, I'm actually, I had a lot of pepperoni sticks and stuff made from the bear that I shot. But I had kept the back straps and the tenderloins, obviously, and did bear steaks with those. But it's different tasting meat, and you have to know how to prepare it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm still learning different ways, but the steaks I've had are awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to experiment, different things with that. If I get another one, just try to do some different things and figure out the best ways to cook it. So,
and that's the other part too. I know we were talking the other day about this kind of similar with like antelope.
mm-hmm.
Like I've never been a big antelope guy because I don't enjoy antelope meat as much, and therefore I'm like I don't have a lot of desire to go hunt things that I don't like enjoy to eat.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of people, especially when I talk about bears, that are like, man, bear meat's like my favorite.
Yeah.
It's like so good, and I'm like, I haven't got to experience it enough to be able to, make that decision. I've tried it before, but never well enough for me. Not that that's my excuse for not ever killing a bear, but it's like that's always been a big part of it for me too, which is like why elk and moose, even like moose would be one of those hunts for me. I really want to do at some point. Hopefully, who knows if it happens in Colorado at this point, but that's a whole other story. But it's like I could eat that all the time.
Yeah, moose is amazing. Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the other part. It's like, just in our name alone, it's like hunt, hike, harvest. My wife's she's a foodie, and so it's like anything I do bring home, it goes to such good use. And I've done that even like with waterfowl. Like I find waterfowl, a lot of people struggle with waterfowl. It's like it takes a while to learn how to actually make, especially goose for food. I don't know if you got it.
Yeah.
We'll share some recipes offline, but goose are tough, man.
Yeah, they are. That's for sure. Yeah, but yeah, it's just finding out different ways to prepare it to maximize it and honor the animal. But yeah, I mean, last night we just had wild turkey and it was awesome. Did it on the Traeger and smoked it and it was great. So and Taylor loved it. So
that's even better. So. We were talking about tags. You drew one good tag this year. The rest of it's going to be OTC.
So I drew 2 tags this year. I drew a buck tag, and it's about a 9-point tag. It's a second season tag. So yeah, it's a good tag. Third or fourth season, that same year, it'd probably take closer to 18, 19 years to draw it. Yeah. So I'm praying for some snow and some weather on that hunt. But I spent the last couple seasons up there. Actually, the D-Sings both drew tags 2 consecutive years up there.
Oh, wow.
So I've been able to spend a little bit of time up there and kind of get familiar with the country. So I'm excited for that one. And then I drew a 4 or 5 point unit tag for archery elk as well.
Nice.
So it's actually a unit that my family's rifle hunted for 40 plus years, and I'll be the first one to archery hunt it. So I'm excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I feel like I live vicariously through a lot of people. Where I had Whitney on the podcast the other day, and she talk about like the dream season. She's got like one of those lined up where she has friends in Alaska. She's doing a blacktail hunt in Alaska.
Wow.
She has a connection with somebody in Arizona. She's going to do a coos deer hunt, and then she won an African safari hunt.
Oh, wow.
And so she's doing all 3 of those this year.
She has a big year. Yeah.
And then she drew a bear tag here, and she's like, I'm like, man, that sounds awesome.
That sounds fun.
I got to stop and go grab my OTC tag.
Yeah.
All the rest of them I didn't draw.
Yeah.
And, I've got like 2 or 3 hunts where I'm more or less like going to be the filmer, the spotter, or the guide, if you will.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a guide by any means, but like helping people on hunts where I'm actually not going to be hunting. So, which is fine, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun just to be there and be a part of the group, and
Yeah. It sounds like based on your work, you get some flexibility that you get to put some time in, which is always good too.
Yeah. Luckily, busy real estate season's usually the spring, and hunting seasons in the fall, so it usually works out pretty good, and
Yeah.
I'm able to devote enough time to get it done most of the time. So
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the first year I'll be hunting a draw unit for elk, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I've always just done OTC.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we'll be excited to see how that goes. How about, so we talked about the pinnacle of the hunts. Is the World Championship calling? Is that on the or not just calling, but to win it? Is that on the bucket list too? Then.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a super competitive guy. I mean, I for sure. I'm quietly competitive though. I don't advertise it to the world, but yeah, I mean, of course, I'd love to win that competition. And the thing is, like all the guys in the elk calling industry, and I mean the group of callers, I mean, we all get along great. We're all on the same mission to kill an elk, bull in the fall. That's why we do it. So we all get along really well, and it's just a great group. It's a great network of guys and girls. But yeah, it's definitely on the list. And this year I unfortunately wasn't able to make Worlds just through some obligations I had. But I told Thomas and Tom I'm not going to miss another one. So
Perfect.
I'll be there next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to that, and definitely see you at some of the other things here locally, which it's awesome to be so close to so many opportunities.
Yeah.
I think for what all of us have at our disposal within a short drive here, that I know I look forward to, whether it's the new Mile Hunt Expo with Hunt and Fish Expo, which was phenomenal. We've always had the ISE, which we won't get into that, but and then just even smaller stuff that I think I'm amazed at the stuff that people have on their radar all the time. I'm like, I should have went to that. There's so many opportunities to get out and about and get entrenched into the outdoor community, which is great. So definitely look forward to that. Make sure people know where to find you. You're a big social media guy, or do you have a YouTube page too?
Yeah, I actually just started a YouTube page. Last week, actually, I created a YouTube page. I just uploaded some shorts on there from that I created for Instagram or whatever. But
nice. Hopefully
to build and expand on that in the future. But yeah, I have an Instagram. It's just CJ_Sefco. And shorten up the last name so people can find it.
We'll make sure we put all that in the show notes and all that stuff so we can connect with you. And it's been cool to get a chance to sit down with you. I know we met relatively briefly, and then I just for me, whenever I go do events, one of the things it's just always something that I try to do is, like, if I'm going to go to a Mile High Expo or whatever, is like meet somebody, one or two new people, right?
Yeah.
And introduce yourself or find yourself in the same circle, and then after that it's follow up, like reach back out and say, hey man, it's great to meet you. And
exactly.
I did that with you, and so it's fun to get a chance to sit down with you, get a chance to learn more about you, and hopefully it won't be the last time we connect and get out and get a chance to maybe see you call again, hopefully on the big stage.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate you, messaging me after we met, and
sure.
You have a great studio and a great setup here, and it was great to spend some time with you.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put all the connectivity, how to find CJ. Make sure you go out, check out him, check out Mile High Game Calls as well. A lot of awesome people. I know you, and I've got a chance to talk with Thomas and more, not quite as much with his dad, but just great people. And again, as you said, it's awesome to see how inviting everyone in and around that community is.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to be a part of it. And who knows, maybe you guys will encourage me enough someday to actually get up there with you.
Yeah, you'll have to get on stage. I'll get you up there one of these years.
I will.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm so used to being in front of people because I present and coach and teach all the time. And then, like, if you add something new that you're not like 100% about, how fast you go, like, I don't know, and so it's like I have my own, like, I think little barriers. I think
the hardest part is just getting up there. Once you're up there, you don't really think about it after that. But
that's funny.
And just ripping the Band-Aid off like I had to.
Yeah. Well, only one way to do it.
Exactly.
So, awesome. Well, good luck this season. Appreciate you coming over, and we'll look forward to keeping up and hopefully see some success this winter. this
Sounds
fall.
good.
So
Appreciate it.
all right,
All right.
thanks. See you guys next time.